Assalamualaikum and good day. I bid to doctor and my fellow friends. So our group, which is group 5, was given a task on the IGOs and global issues. So after a few discussion, we've decided to make on the Palestine and Israel conflict. So group 5 consisted of me myself, Muhammad Isma Nazhan bin NADZERI. Second is Muhammad MUAZZAM bin ABDUL RAHMAN. Third is NURFARAH SHAHRIZAT BINTI MUSTAFFA KAMAL. So without further ado, I'll start with my presentation, which is introduction. So in this part, introduction, we need to know first what is conflict. So after doing some research, conflict is a struggle or contest between people with opposing needs, ideas, beliefs, values, or goals. So from this conflict, it may escalate and lead to destructive outcomes, particularly in the form of physical violence that is increasingly seen as legitimate as conflict escalates. It may also contribute to a new social or political structure and can be beneficial if the parties concerned are able to deal with their incompatibilities in order to create such a new organizational type. So, as we all know, there are many ways of solving the conflict, whether in peaceful way or violent way. So the common for violent way is war, of course, obviously, right? So among the peaceful ways are mediation, good offices, negotiation, arbitration, and lastly, unilateral settlement procedures. Moving on to the next point, which is about the research questions for our topic. Firstly, we have come up with what is meant by the right to return. Next, what are the real-world problems of Israel-Palestine? Next, what are the possible ways to solve the problems? So, to answer this research question, we've come up with research objective. Firstly, to find out the right to return. Next is to investigate the real-world problems of Israel-Palestine. And next, to examine the possible ways to solve the problems. So, my last part for my next point for my presentation is right to return. Before we go further deeper into right to return, we need to know who involved in right to return. So generally, person who involved with right to return is refugee. So who is refugee? According to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, refugee is person who is forced to flee his or her country, which is having war, persecution, or violence, is called a refugee. So, what is right to return? Right to return is a universal right enacted in international law by means of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Geneva Convention. It is a political concept essential to land defenders all over the world and in the many places where people resist displacement and fight for their rights to stay on or return to their territory. So, the right is retained not only by those who originally left a territory, but also by their descendants, as long as they have established appropriate relation with the same territory. The right continues to exist even when sovereignty is rebutted over the territory or has changed hands. So we can see that this right to return will remain the same for as long as uh, it has connection with their own territory. So for the next point, I'll pass on to my friends. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum and a very good morning to Dr. Norafita and to my group mates. My name is NURFARAH SHAHRIZAT binti bersama KAMAL, and I'll be presenting about defining the real world problems of Israel and Palestine. So, Israel and Palestine conflict is one of the oldest and controversial conflicts in global issues, which involve the dispute between two movements, the Jewish Zionists and the Palestinian nationalists, which claim to be on the same territory. This conflict between Israel and Palestine basically because of geographical reasons, a conflict between Arabs and the Jews that the territory between the Mediterranean Sea and the Dead Sea belongs to. The United Nations split the lands 50-50 between the Arabs and Palestine and the Jews of Israel, but Israel took most of the Palestine by force, forcing many Palestinians as refugees to neighboring countries. Around 750,000 Palestinians were displaced and became refugees immediately as a result of the war of 1948. So none of these displaced persons were ever allowed to return to their homes or communities which they have been displaced, and the population of the Palestinian refugees continued to grow during the period since 1948. Today, there are more than 7 million Palestinian refugees distributed all over the world. The fact that Palestinian forced displacement is at the center of Palestinian experience, and the Palestinian refugee issue is at the heart of the Israel-Palestine conflict. So, both sides of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has their own narrative that tells some of the facts. So both sides interpret events from their own narrative points of view, blame the other, and ignore their own contributions to the conflict. Israel and Palestine both are in a state of denial, denying the answer to its own actions. The Palestinian narrative focuses on victimhood, their suffering and dispossession, and their profound sense of injustice that is to blame for the persecution of Jews in Europe. They leave behind the past of the outbreaks of war, their brutality, their weak leaderships, and their relentless refusal to take advantage of the accommodation opportunity. For the Israel story highlights their long-standing historical commitment to the region, the legitimacy accorded to the UN partition scheme, their neighbors' animosity and relentless threat of war, and their peace proposal being rejected. It's all underpinning the ever-present pain of the Holocaust. They are living out their own part, and they rationalize and degrade the brutality of the professions. So the situation is further compounded by the traditional Western mindset of both condoning and largely ignoring the local Palestinian community. The conflict is actually began during the establishment of Israel on 1948, but the conflict is actually started way back since the British Mandate period in 1920s. This time was marked by the British military government governing the region known as the British Mandate of Palestine. Some of the major events during this time were the rise of Jewish immigration to the Palestine Mandate and the modernization of the territory. So the United Nations are the key player here in this conflict that led to the partition of Palestine in 1947 and the creation of Israel in the next following year in 1948. During that time, the UN General Assembly has passed the resolution 194, affirming the right of Palestinian refugees to return to their homes and receive accommodation and compensation for their losses. When Israel joined the UN following year, its membership on Resolution 273 relied on its recognition founded and on its way to peace. The UN, the United Nations, has been excluded from the issues politics. UN peacekeepers were stationed at the Israel-Egyptian border, and the UN Refugee Works Agency was formed to support refugees until they return home. But there was little intervention as an organization in political decision making. Okay. So years after years, there are so many proposals for solutions that have been proposed, but none has been implemented because of both sides' reluctance to tolerate. There are three suggestions for the conflict solution. The first one is the evacuation of Jewish communities in the Palestinian state. This will be necessary if the future Israel government seeks to implement the principle of the two state for two people. This will be very challenging, traumatic for a human and societal perspective, and politically problematic. But at the same time, most of the difficulties can be overcome by advanced and thorough planning, appropriate compensation, internal Israeli dialogue that unites the population, appropriate legislation, and a comprehensive plan for the resettlement of evacuees. There is, however, a definite possibility of friction and clashes between the Jewish communities and the Arabs, the Palestinian surrounding, which could turn into a state of high intensity open conflict. But many experts believe that the idea is not at all feasible from a political, security, and practical point of view, even in a state of complete peace. The second suggestion is that both sides need to realize that they exist. So that's it. They basically have to believe that they both exist on the same territory. Israel need to accept the existence of Palestine, and the Palestinians need to accept the existence of Israel. Once they have accepted this, all the other things will fall into its place. But on the one hand, the Jews living in the West Bank need to realize that they cannot continue to build Jewish settlements on land that is not officially Israeli territory. By leaving these lands, the IDF can leave the West Bank, and a two-state solution will be viable. So, on the other hand, the Palestinians need to recognize Israel as a Jewish state and realize that the only solution to the conflict is peace between the Jews and Palestinians. Many Palestinians accept this reality, but the vast majority still do not, and some even call for the extermination for all the Jews. From what we can see, both sides cannot work together for a peaceful solution because they have always want the other side to disappear and surrender. Compromise is the key, as we all know about it. They need to understand this and work together to actually achieve peace for the people. We know this will not happen in the near future, and that is exactly why this will always be one of the Lord's suggestions for peace between these two states. The third and last suggestion is Jerusalem must be shared and internationalized. Palestine and Israel both want Jerusalem, and the only way to solve it is either to divide the city east-west, to divide the old city, or to internationalize the city, or to combine internationalization and division. Neither side will rest until it can assure its followers that its sacred site will be protected. The majority of United Nations member states believe that the final status of the Jerusalem should be resolved through negotiations, and therefore favor the location of their embassies in Tel Aviv prior to the final status agreement. However, at the end of 2010s, the international consensus to abstain from expressing a view on the city's final status showed signs of fragility, with Russia and United States and Australia adopting new policy positions. Furthermore, the proposals that Jerusalem should be the future capital of the Israel and Palestine has also received international support, with the support of both the UN, the United Nations, and the European Union. So that's all for me.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad MUAZZAM bin Abdul Rahman. My matric number is 256509. I am third representative. So, my part is about the best solution from the solution that have been discussed by second representative. So, in my part, I will discuss about the best solution that can be applied to the conflict Israel-Palestine. So, for the intro, I will talk little about this conflict. So, the conflict between Israel and Palestine is one of the most complicated conflict in the world and in the Middle East. The interference of America or USA has made this conflict worse and more difficult to resolve. The conflict is difficult to resolve because we know the conflict interest by Israel and Palestine is different, and we can see the long period of this conflict has tell everyone how this conflict are very difficult to resolve, which is it has began from the 19th century. So, in 2017, the American President Donald Trump has made an announcement that USA has recognized Jerusalem as Israel capital. Trump also want to relocate the US embassy to Jerusalem. This decision has condemned by Palestinian leader and other leader in the Middle East and Europe because Jerusalem is the holy place for Muslim after Mecca. This conflict will not easy to handle because the interests of each country must be fulfilled if want to resolve. So, the resolution of Israel and Palestine conflict is complicated by the national interest of regional power, the lack of domestic unity from two sides, which is Israel and Palestine, is the significant problem that made the peace difficult to achieve. For the example, in 2006, the Palestine have been split by conflict between two major factions, which is Fatah, the largest party, and the Hamas, an Islamic militant group. Accordingly, the territory controlled by the Palestinian National Authority is split between Fatah in the West Bank, Hamas in the Gaza Strip. This has proven problematic because Hamas is considered a terrorist organization by Israel and many other countries. Although Hamas won the Palestinian election in 2006, it was not allowed to participate any formal negotiation. Zionists take an opportunity to build nation for Jews in Palestine when the Balfour Declaration was issued. At that time, the Palestine was already under British occupation, and this happened after the Muslim army was down the Ottoman Turkish. Zionists take an opportunity to build a nation for Jews in Palestine because the Balfour Declaration was issued. At that time, Palestine was already under British occupation. So, Zionists use this kind of way to achieve their desire to create a nation. So, in this part, I will tell the best solution that I will choose of our group for the best solution problem. So, the best that can apply for two country conflict is the second suggestion from the second presenter, which is the two-state solution. The two-state solution works for resolving the conflict between Israel and Palestine by showing two states for two people. Two-state solution proposed by the Oslo Accords after the series of historical events such as when the fallen of Ottoman Empire, both Jews and Arab claim right to the historical Palestine. And the first attempt at subdividing the land in 1948 ended in an Israel state, but not Palestine state, and the West Bank and the Gaza Strip collapsed under Jordanian and Egyptian rule. In 1974, United Nations resolution on the peaceful settlement for the Palestine and Israel can be defined as two-state solution. Two-state solution is when Israel and Palestine can share the Holy Land living in separate. The boundary for each country can be calculated to make sure there is no misunderstanding between two states. In 1919, a development agreement settled by Israel and Palestine leaders in Oslo, Norway, set out a process for commonly negotiated two-state solution to be increasingly implemented by the end of decade. Although the process offered initial promise and progress, a combination and dissatisfaction led to uprising of violence in 2000s. The process proved difficult to restart before coming for a virtual interruption after 2008. This is challenge for the two-state solution policy. Both countries need to understand first the procedure and work together to achieve peace for their people, including the United Nations, Arab League, the European Union, and other that will support for the peace in the world. So, in the last part, we will talk about the advantage and the disadvantage from the two-state solution. For the advantage that I can see is, this is the chance for Palestine to be recognized by the world by at the 23 September 2011. The Palestine has sent the application to access the full membership in the United Nations to Security Council, and that has been proved by them. This will help the Palestine to be more independent, sovereign, and democratic country. Besides, they also can change their socio-economic demographic, where the country had almost half the population is under poverty and getting many sanctions from Israel. So for the disadvantage is actually the two-state solution encourage more violence when the two states stay close. When they stay close and there was enemy, many violence that can happen to their people, and every day people will die if this violence will go on and continue. So lastly, for the conclusion is the right of return for refugees is a universal right. It has been preserved in international law through the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Geneva Convention. So Palestine have a right to return to their home. Although in 1948 Israel has declared itself a state, while the truth they take from the Palestine. It is our obligation to make sure Palestine have their right because it related to humanity. Many agreement they be signed, but the problem is still not solved. The conflict is happened too long, and one day we hope the Palestine will peace again just before. Thank you. That's all from our group.